This is the weekly breakdown. This episode is going to be a bit more free-flowing because the biggest event and the biggest information coming out last week is the new GDP numbers. The new GDP numbers showing the fact that we are one of the only countries, in fact, the only country in the OECD, I believe, decreasing and contracting as a country, dropping 0.9%, while other countries, even the UK, are increasing at 0.2%. GDP per capita fell 1.1% from the last quarter. We fell from 0.6. If you want a specific example, in the Tasman, 300 jobs are on the line. Carter Holt Harvey, for example, which are the 300 jobs. And Sealord wants to cut 79 roles down in Tasman, which came out, I believe, in Saturday of last week. Is their economic agenda working? More specifically, do you think Luxon will last long enough for the next election?
I think so. I think he'll last, I think, till next election, and I think he'll still be successful in a re-election bid. But I think a lot of people are. Well, he's managing things.
Well, I say that because that not only is he getting stick from the left, from my court, which is going to happen either way, he's getting stick from his own court. Roger Douglas and Ruth Richardson coming out recently demanding Nicola Willis herself to resign. Their arguments are more that they're not cutting enough. But the whole party, more specifically the leadership team, the two most powerful role, arguably the second most powerful role in the country, is getting a lot of stick for her to resign. For me personally, I want to see him carry on until the election because I don't see how we can stack it. Since the country has seen how impersonal he is. But I don't see how, I don't see how he can last that long with this sort of downturn that not even any other experts expected. Punters in their own court don't really respect him. He seems like he's being backed into a wall.
I think he's doing the best job he can do. I think he's inherited a big mess. He's inherited a huge mess. Obviously, I'm not saying that. I'm not one for blaming the predecessors.
Don't be holier than thou.
I'm not one for that. I'm just saying I do a little bit, obviously, but you can't continually do that, which is, I think, what Roger Douglas was saying when he was having his interview. You blame them to a point, but you just have to get on with the job. And I think a lot of politicians in New Zealand don't do that, from my experience. But hey, I think also, at the time when he took over the lead the campaign for election, there was nobody else really ready to take that on. As you recall, and as I recall, and I'm sure you recall as well, they went through quite a few leaders, and the party was, not in a very good state. And when he took over, hey, look, I thought it was going to be a turnaround, and to a point, as I think I'm not an expert by any means, but I think he's just misjudged the job a wee bit.
I certainly think he was naive in that. Yeah, I wanted to go back to your comment that it was the last government's fault. Funnily enough, during the year of the election, this economy was growing at a rate of over 2%, I believe, 2.7, plus 2.7%. We were growing as a country. We weren't in a recession in the after effects of the huge global recession and the global consequences and the effects of COVID in 2020 and 2021. And then we were growing under a competent governance. Were they not perfect? Absolutely. But you can't tell me that this is a result of previous and external examples that Nicola Willis uses, and not say that not even a hack job. I use the word hack job that this government does. It's not really a hack job. It's more an incompetent meandering. Because Ruth Richardson and Roger Douglas are right. They could do more. They could have actually done more. They could be ripping the heart out of this country. They could be making moves do union break a lot of like the PSA and PPTA. It could be doing stuff like that. They could be doing a lot more. So I think it'd be better to categorize them as incompetent meandering. But I don't like. My point is that how can isn't this such a great example that when you cut government expenditure, capital expenditure, or even operating expenditure, but more specifically capital expenditure from this country and from general public, you get a result like this because business won't want to come in, won't want to invest when there isn't a guaranteed foundation, especially in construction, which has decreased, I believe, construction fell 1.8% while manufacturing declined 3.5%. And that is a direct result. And I use Tasman as an example because that's the most recent, obviously. It's happened across the country because of government pulling out of multiple, and I could bring up, obviously we could bring up Dunedin, IREX, blah, 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 because that's the most specific examples. But across the history, 45 houses, thousands of construction workers are leaving this country. I believe a few hundred are leaving a day. Not contract, but across the board. A few hundred New Zealanders are leaving this country to go to Australia. How can you not say that is a result of Labour and not this government?
Well,
what do you have to prove that?
I'm not. First of all, I didn't say that. I didn't say that as.
Well, let me. What do you?
We're talking economy-wise. So basically, I'm not saying everything was their fault. I'm not saying anything actually is their fault. I was just saying that when they took over, National took over, things were in a pretty bad state. And have they made it better? Have they made it worse? Well, I think the jury's still out. I think we've got to wait to see how things end in the next year, and we'll see. I guess we'll see what happens, and people will decide with their vote whether he's done a good enough job or whether he hasn't. So, I think it's.
Are you?
It's, like, I guess if you look at it this way, I suppose. Also, they've announced just recently 100 million in for hospital upgrades. So
upgrades that weren't. That's not
the board, not just Dunedin.
That's not an introduced figure from. That's not money introduced by the Crown. No. That is already in the budget. There's
I get that, but that's still there. They could have just got rid of that completely.
Sure.
If they really wanted to gut the place.
Sure.
But they didn't.
Look, I'm not my rhetorical dancing against the National Party, I don't hate them. I just dislike them severely.
I think they're good. Yeah. They're good because, in my view, not for what they're doing, but because they've got somewhat of a direction where they want to go. They just need to figure out how to get there.
Well, that's my other question. Right. If you wanted to compare the two, I was going to say the key government, but I think we weren't as paying attention as much. So I'll use the two recent governments, the Ardern government and the Luxon government, and you would weigh them up. Even if you disagreed with any policy that Ardern had, compared with the Luxon, can you name any overarching policy longer than a term that this government has instilled and directed this country? A three waters sort of co-governance policy, not specifically that, but as an example. Could you name that?
So you ask what you're asking with
does Luxon can you see a plan?
Have one of those things. Well, I think you have to look at it differently, because when Ardern took over, the economy was in far better stead than it is now. The job for Luxon is now different. Like, is much more different for him as Prime Minister than for Ardern for Key. Actually, key.
You do. Okay.
Well, Three Waters was a disaster. I'm glad that's not
Just
happening.
use it.
This whole co-governance thing is a bunch of bollocks.
I just use that as an example. But are you telling me that after a crisis, there is more of an excuse to not have an economic plan and direction out of the crisis?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is I think they do have a plan.
I mean, they are.
They do. Yeah. Well, they have a direction. I think they're doing a decent job, but across the board, it looks like a lot of people don't agree with that, and that's fine. That's what democracy is. I think that they're doing a fine job. If I just look at my life personally and how things have changed for me, okay, not a lot, but hey, I think it's better under these guys than the previous guys from a personal standpoint.
Well, for you, because you're an adult now and you're doing your own thing, you're a student under a Dern, but
yes.
Could you give
what I'm trying to say to that?
Could you give an example of what you like about the direction of this government? You see past that would make you vote for them. Not saying that you would, but
yeah, I think Luxon. I like you say Luxon's impersonal, but Luxon as a person for me, I think he's good. I think he's nice enough. He doesn't have to relate to everybody. I mean, that's fine. I think as a person, I think he's a good person, good family man. As far as policy goes, I think a lot of this. Yeah, I'm glad that they stopped a lot of the three. I'm glad they're not doing Three Waters. I'm glad they've cut off the whole co-governance because it's undemocratic. I also think,
you can't name. So you can't name anything specific that this government is doing that is a long-term plan for this country. Nothing at all.
Well, I think road use charges, how they're changing the framework, taking away the petrol tax and making people pay a road. Everyone pays a road user charge for how.
I just want to say that you're cutting in and out because I think maybe I don't know if it's my internet or if your internet's. But I just wanted to tell you that. So
yeah, no. So I think the road user charge, restructuring of that, and not having a fuel tax is good. I think that's a good policy. As for one example,
those are all short-term plans. I mean, long-term.
Well, I don't think that that's a short-term plan. I think that is a long-term plan. I think that that is definitely a long-term plan to pay for roads, and I feel like it's a more fair system.
Okay.
Well, on the surface, I mean, it hasn't been introduced, but on the surface, I see it as a better than one we have.
Okay. Have you voted for a local election? I want to move on to a next topic, and I'm going to ask you this question. Since we're in election year, no, you haven't. Of course, you haven't.
No, 40%. I didn't get my voting papers, so
no, you didn't. Well, that's one of the criticisms I have for local elections. Mail-in voting is good, but to not have in-person voting as well is incredibly foolish, and I think is part of the reason why you don't actually have a high turnout. Not just because people choose not to vote, but I think that turnout would be much higher if people, because I think some people don't have their address registered there. In my opinion, I could be wrong. 40% of the country usually votes. It's less than half. I bring this up obviously because we're in election year. I think literally next week, 1 or 2 weeks, elections will finish, and we'll get our new councillors and our new mayors. Why? Because if you got your voting papers, would you have voted?
I think so. I would have if I did get my voting papers. I'm more of a thing. It's for me. I have, I'm all about democracy, so I think I would have. I've had a bit of a didn't vote last time in the local elections, but I think this time I would have voted.
What would have motivated?
Because it affects me a bit more these days.
What would have motivated you to vote? I think I know the answer, but I'm just interested.
What would have motivated me?
Let me rephrase that. Sorry. What would motivate you to vote for a particular person? Who would, if you catch my drift, which sort of candidate would make you want to vote for them?
Someone who managed manage the books properly, I suppose. I think someone who would cut rates, someone who would look after the homeowners for a change, and just general stuff. I think there's a lot of I've never been on the council. I've never obviously, but I feel like there's a lot of wasteful spending. Someone who would actually get someone to turn be nice. Paying all this money in those street lights, a local thing for me. Well, they're not always off, to be fair, but sometimes they don't switch them on or try to save money, I guess. But if you're paying all this money, that'd be nice. But generally, someone, just as a general thing, someone that would just balance the books and make the dollar go a bit further.
I already said why I brought it up. Let me move on. I think that I knew you were going to answer that. Balance the books. Get us spending in order. What would you classify as incorrect? Not saying where you live, but I was going to talk about how it was a good example to use as the fact that central government is pulling out a lot of investments and making local government pulling up the tab when it comes to water infrastructure, as an example. What? Oh, I lost my train of thought. Shit, I forgot what I was going to ask. Fuck. Oh, I was right there. Anyway, I'll move on. Fuck, I forgot the question. I think that a big problem that people don't see, and I spoke about it many, many, many times, is that I think historically people seem to think that if you cap rates, automatically things get better, or if there's some fantastical thought process that things are expensive because people in local government are spending on woke parties or something like that, or the Maoris are getting $1,000 each in the Māori wards or some such. It really isn't the case, and I think I forgot the mayor's name. He had a pledge to cap rates at, I believe, 1 or 2% in Christchurch.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's going to escape me. They had to double. The rates rises were double. And the reason that he gave was that he didn't quite realise, and I think this is true across the board, is that he didn't quite grasp the reality of the expenditure that local government in Christchurch had to make and across the country, and that a lot of it is dependent on deficit servicing. Now, sort of structure is very different to how central government works. Now, you can print money, with our disagreements or with my disagreement, and maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't, but you can do that. There is a way to bring in extra capital or foreign capital without losing your integrity. Local government can't exactly do that. And I think we get into this danger into losing ourselves, and the first collapse of this country would be the collapse of our local government. I just wanted to speak on local government because I've voted, and I think it's really, really, really important that people get involved in your not necessarily in your local community. Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't, but just vote, just be a part of that, because it's really, really important, because you will lose it, and there will be a decision made without your consent, and then you won't really have a leg to stand on when you bitch and moan about things and you haven't voted. I'm not using you as an example because there are instances that you don't get your voting papers, which is absurd, but Is there
It happens.
Last thoughts? We'll move on.
I haven't got any thoughts on that. I think I've exhausted that for this week.
Is there anything you wanted to talk about? Is there any topic that has been rattling around in your head that you want to ask me or you want to speak about? Because I have my own show and you don't exactly, so fair's fair.
Oh, I think, general elections next year. I'll ask you this. I just want to know what you think.
So, stage is yours.
If Chris Luxon either gets overthrown or resigns or whatever, because, people are thinking he's not doing a good job, who is going to take over?
I don't know. Honestly, I was going to ask you this question, but it kind of slipped me. I don't know. I genuinely don't know, because if you told me a couple of months ago, I'd say Stanford. The events that happened, I think it was about a month ago, my recent memory passes me, with the whole the Māori book scandal. Before that, she was able to separate herself reasonably from any scandals. So I would have said her. there has been a lot of speculation even before National got into government about Nicola Willis rolling Luxon. Even then, I don't think that's going to be true now because I think they're a pair, and I've got a bit of a conspiracy theory on why she hasn't been rolled, because there is a bit of a gentleman's agreement that if she doesn't get sacked, she will back him in any leadership challenge. So I think if I had to pick one, it would be Stanford, but she doesn't come across as the type of person that would try and roll him. Bishop, definitely not.
Well, and I think,
especially the recent polling, he just doesn't come across. Maybe as a deputy, but no, I'd say Stanford.
Yeah, well, I think Willis won't be able to do it because she's already unpopular. So if he goes, she'll go. I think.
I think I think there's a deal there, in my opinion.
It could be. I think Chris Bishop, as much as he say he won't, I think he's probably probably be the next. If you look at it, I think Stanford maybe, but I think Luxon is still their best. Is still their best.
I just
best option.
100%
to carry them through.
I think it's I don't think you've been following Australian politics, but I think it's the Dutton scenario that I don't think there's anybody else. I think Stanford, in my opinion, is the fact that she actually, I think she's got more political acumen than anybody else in the cabinet. Chris Bishop and Stanford, I think they both have that political acumen. I just don't think Bishop is leadership material, in my opinion, from what I've seen, as opposed to Willis and Luxon. But Luxon does have, it might be just preconceived and preordained by, media and just precedents. But he does come across as, and it might be because he has leadership role as a CEO, he does come across as some form of a leader. It might be an empty suit, but he does have some. I do agree with you. I don't see anybody else being prime minister. I've got another interesting, because there was a poll that came out by RNZ's first poll with Reed Research. It was Reed Research because they used to be partnered with NewsHub, but then they went under, so now it's RNZ. And there was a poll between who do you rate as a leader if Chris Hipkins or Chris Luxon was to step down. When it was Chris Hipkins, I believe for inner party it was 10% from McAnulty. I mean, more than half, I think, just that weren't undecided. I believe over 10% was McAnulty, and Cipollone was 11% inner party or more specifically the Labour voters, and then generally McAnulty was 11% and Cipollone was 4%. And then I think the other way around for National, I believe, I can't remember, I don't have the notes next to me, it was correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was Stanford who was at that mark, and then Bishop was at 4%. Stanford was about 10%, Bishop was about 4%. I'm gonna table it onto you for Labour, because right now, Chris Hipkins is a bit of a placeholder. Who do you think's the best replacement in that shadow cabinet?
Good question. Yeah, probably McAnulty would be the best. I don't think Cipollone would do very well. I mean, I'd never vote for her.
No, I don't think she would. No disrespect to her, but she doesn't. Maybe she's a good deputy. I don't dislike her, but I think Barbara Edmonds would be way better as a leader than Cipollone, in my opinion. It might be my bias talking, is that she's not anymore, because now it's my national MP for Otaki is for now before I move. But I just don't. I think it's McAnulty, and it really shocked me in that poll. It's not by much; it's like in the 10s, but Cipollone is just as popular in the Labour base, by the looks of it, as McAnulty. But generally, McAnulty is more popular. So, and that it's a little grain of salt, because it's not a very big margin.
And now that I think of it, if he gets a bit more, I think Tama Portucker. I mean, that would be a perfect person. If he can manage it, he would do good, because
that's out. You know what? I see it. I do see it. Maybe can that bring in some Māori votes? Probably not. Maybe. I think that he's
I think he's quite good at too. I think
I think he is.
I completely get he does a good job, and
I think, in my opinion, when it comes to him, he's definitely been seen as a bit of a weak player in that cabinet. The fact that he's Māori relations, but he's kind of just not that maybe not has. I'm not saying that he has, but arguably he kind of has. Definitely seen as someone that has weak hand in talks as for Māori. And I think he's also housing minister, housing and urban development minister, I believe. That's a good one. I see it. I think it's Erica Stanford, but I do see it. I respect it.
yeah, I think he would do a decent job. I'm not saying now, it could be another 5-10 years before he gets his chance. I mean, you look at how long everyone else has been in there, And Judith Collins, she didn't do very well.
No, I'm surprised she stayed.
So yeah, it's becoming a bit more prevalent that they stay after they sort of lose the seat. I suppose. I think Todd Muller did for a wee while afterwards.
Yeah,
but he didn't last very long. He just couldn't handle it.
Yeah,
I think, which is fair enough. But yeah, I think Tama Pōtake could do a good job at some stage.
Okay. So, do you like Erica Stanford? Because I've got a funny feeling that you just don't really rate her enough.
No, I think she's good. I think she's doing a fine job at being the education minister.
Yeah. Yeah,
I think I can't see her as a leader yet. She's the leader. She is a leader, but I can't imagine her leading the government as a prime minister just yet. I don't know if that's because
she would come off as, in my opinion, I think she'll be sort of like a Christopher Hipkins sort of prime minister, where she steps in if the current prime minister steps down, and then she just wouldn't really be. She'll be like, she's all right. She's not she's not like a Jacinda Ardern or Key type, where there is sort of not a cult of personality, but not a reverence, just a respect. There was a level of that they're a world leader. I think because no one really sees Chris Hipkins as that, but it's pretty phenomenal. We're just talking about general things right now, but it's pretty phenomenal to me that right now, before Labor has released any policy, they are neck and neck, and there's recent polls coming out. I think it was the Taxpayers Union first, where the Right Bloc, New Zealand for the current coalition, had a 1-seat majority in a poll. Second poll comes out, the recent Reid Research poll, has it a hung parliament. I mean, and that is without current policy released from Labor. I think that, in my opinion, if once the ball starts rolling, once things start getting released, I believe they're going to release new policy next month, but I could be wrong. It's at the end of the year, definitely. Going into an election year, there's going to be momentum built up. So it can only go up, but it could also go really terribly. We just don't know.
Yeah. The thing is, I'm obviously I'm going to back my party, and always, because at the moment, because I really do not want a Labor government. That the way they're talking, they want capital gains taxes, and then their mates over in the Green Party want wealth taxes and good looks taxes, and
you would be fine. You wouldn't meet that requirement.
Oh, hey, hit me up about it if they get in. That's what's gonna. But they want to tax everything. Well, the Greens do, and a capital gains tax is no good for the country, in my opinion. I think
it's going
if
pretty
they
well.
bring that in, I really, really don't want to see that. So I hope that the National Party gets back on their feet, and I hope the ACT Party keeps growing.
We didn't really speak about the Tucker Ferris events, which I don't want to talk about, but it brings up a topic on what parties Labor's going to work with. I think it's inevitable that Labor, if they get in government, they will coalition with the Greens. But do you think there's any possibility in New Zealand First working with them?
With Labour,
Mm.
I hope. Don't know. I would say no.
Because Peters has said that he wouldn't work with the current leadership, which is specifically Hipkins, because
So basically, all that means is if there's another leader that comes in and leads it, then he would, pretty much, or he would consider it.
Now, yeah, I mean,
But
this
I
is going
mean,
to talk about.
he's shaky ground anyway.
My mind is riding to talking about what Labour's strategy in keeping Christopher Hipkins in the current job, what their strategy is as a caucus going into the next term. Because I've literally said this from the start of this term, is that I think they should keep Hipkins going into the next election. This government would do as bad as it's doing right now, but my thoughts back then were keep Hipkins until the end, into the next election next year, and just if we lose, we'd probably just roll them in, bring in one. By then there'd be up and coming MPs like Kieran McAnulty that can take the mantle. What it seems like now is that Chris Hipkins could become a new leader, but I mean, but could it be a win-win for the party that they don't have to try out new blood and risk them getting dropped and wait until the next election? Or I don't know. I'm kind of rambling on this last point. I don't think we've got anything else to talk about now. But
yeah, I think Labor will pretty much always sell their soul to the Green Party because they need support, and I mean, there's no one else there for them. I think maybe New Zealand First would work with Labor, but I can't see it.
No, because I don't see them dropping Hipkins. That's the thing. I don't see it happening. I think they shouldn't, because even if Labour loses, I think it'd be catastrophic. In my opinion, I think it'd be catastrophic for the National Party if they stayed in another term, because they definitely won't win a third term. It just won't happen. What they're doing right now, they're being so bullish instead of being like a John Key government and being terrible government, in my opinion. But they had competent governors like Bill English and Jerry Brownlee and John Key himself, and among others that I keep, and they had good Māori relations pretty good enough. This government doesn't really have that. I don't think they'll last a third term. Nowhere near a third term. They will crash and burn. I don't even think they will last till the third election. I honestly think, in my opinion, it'd be best if that party loses so they can rejig themselves. So maybe for Labour, it'd be better off if they just lose the election, bring in McAnulty as a new leader, and then go from there. They will have the high ground, in my opinion, honestly, but, at a cost of the country, which we'll see. I think we'll start to see a lot of sell-offs going into next period, in my opinion.
I think for Chris Hipkins, we'll go back to Mr. Peters, I think he knows, he's saying he doesn't want to work with this current leadership because he knows that he won't be able to push as far with this current leadership. If somebody now took over, he would consider it, because whoever takes over, he's going to feel like he earned a bit more. And I think that's probably what that reasoning behind his. That's what is behind his reasoning.
I also think it's because the recent New Zealand First conference, or State of the Nation, whatever they call it, when they were voting on policies, there was a lot of sentiment that I read that New Zealand First members were very antsy on Winston Peters because they know that no matter what Winston Peters promises, that they won't work with Labour, that he won't work with Labour. He didn't say that, but they know that he could turn around and just go with them. So they are not. So it might be dependent on the fact that maybe there won't be enough voters that could go with him, and this might be, and he could get booted out because of the fact that he opens the door to working with Labour, and there's more polarisation in that party than there were previously. That he doesn't have a choice. He's leaving the door open, but
you look at Winston anyway. I mean, he's getting on a bit.
Mark my
How
words.
long
The first time he
is he
leaves,
gonna-
mark my words. The moment he loses, if he loses office next election, I don't think he will run again. And if he loses next election, he won't run again. And I think the election after, he won't run again. I'd be very shocked if he did. He's at the end. And he needs to go. And not even in terms of any policy disagreements. He just needs to keep his legacy and just move on. Because he'll lose that respect the moment he starts.
I like him. He's been pretty good lately.
Oh, they're talking about as terms of policy proposal. They're talking about power renationalisation, buying back shares in the power companies.
Yeah. And actually, now that he's just marked my words, Mark Mitchell could probably take the National Party if they really needed somebody.
He's like Male Crusher, but worse. Nah, he doesn't have it. That's the first time they went, Potaka, I see it. No, Mark Mitchell, absolutely not. He doesn't. I don't think he doesn't come across, as even in a cabinet minister. He doesn't really have the juice. I don't see it. Mark Mitchell, nah, not having it.
Well, and if Jerry wasn't the speaker,
Jerry Brownlee, yes,
yeah, if he wasn't the speaker, he could try. But I don't know if enough people really like him.
No, and you can't really, yeah. No, definitely not Mark Mitchell. Absolutely not. No.